Good evening and welcome to Artist Talk on Art. I'm Doug Shear, President, and this event is occurring on Monday, February 5th, 2024. Tonight, eminent photographer Neal Slavin will discuss his embrace of painting and drawing in addition to photography and filmmaking with Carrie Welch in a dialogue titled appropriately, Lenses and Brushes. First, a few words about ATOA. We have recently entered our 50th anniversary year. Founded in 1974, Artist Talk on Art, a 501c3 not-for-profit, is the longest running and most prolific independent forum in contemporary art. Since its inception, ATOA has held and recorded more than 1,100 talks featuring nearly 9,000 artists, curators, critics, historians, art writers, academics, and museum and gallery staff. Our historic archive resides at Archives of American Art of the Smithsonian, where it represents their largest such audio-video collection. Our 50th anniversary will be celebrated later this spring at the Soho Photo Gallery on Monday, May 20th, and there will also be a fundraising auction for which works will begin to be solicited soon. Tonight's talk is being streamed on Zoom and recorded under an ATOA copyright. By tomorrow, it should be also posted to our YouTube channel, where you'll find over 100 other recordings residing for easy viewing. We suggest you hold your questions or comments until the last part of our 90-minute program. I should mention that I met Neal Slavin when I participated in a photography happening called the Market Diner Bash, organized by my colleague, the critic and author Alan Coleman, in May of 1972. Neal took the definitive group picture, which also became a poster. Whoever you are, please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. At that time, I was running the Egg Store Video Art Facility down in Tribeca. And now, a bit about tonight's interviewer, Carrie Welch. A senior nonprofit executive, Carrie Welch's most recent full-time role was in the newly created position of Chief External Relations Officer at the New York Public Library, in which she served from 2014 through 2021, overseeing development, communications and marketing, revenue and alliances, and public program departments. During this period, she was also the liaison to Frederick Weissman in the making of the motion picture Ex Libris, a documentary about the public library. Welch came to the library from the International Rescue Committee, or IRC, during the period 2008 and 2014, where as the first senior vice president for external relations, she transformed IRC's funding model, increasing annual revenue by 200%. She also vastly grew the audience for the IRC's work and built a leading and innovative digital presence. She was also instrumental in reinvigorating this important institution and its brand. Before that, Ms. Welch served as the founding administrative member of the Association of International Photography Art Dealers, also known as APAD. Prior to her time at IRC, Welch served as the first executive vice president of global communications at Lowe and Partners, in charge of internal and external relations. She was also vice president for communications at Time Inc., where she helped launch CNNmoney.com and several of their branded conferences, including co-chairing Fortune's Most Powerful Woman Summit. Welch had a long and varied career at Time Inc., primarily at Time and Time International. She spent several years living in Europe and Asia and traveled extensively. Welch serves on the board of the Women's Refugee Commission. She graduated magna cum laude with a BFA from New York University. And now I'll turn things over to Carrie Welch. Carrie. Unmute yourself, Carrie.
Apologies for that. Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. I didn't expect you to read that, and I'm embarrassed it was so long. And I'm sure some of you are wondering why, with the background that was just described, I would be here interviewing Neal. But I will say that as somebody that studied painting, printmaking, art history, and the history of photography, it's actually an honor for me to be here for this Artist Talk About Art presentation. And it's especially meaningful to be in a dialogue with my friend Neal Slavin, who I've known and worked with, and whose work I've long admired, and also have the pleasure and privilege of having it on my wall among the photographs I have collected. I have a interesting and weird background, but art and photography have always been a thread through those years of professional endeavors. As most of you probably know, we'll get to Neal, much more important than my background. As most of you probably know, Neal is a true New Yorker and a bit of a Renaissance man. Born and raised in Brooklyn, Neal studied at Cooper Union, and in addition to photography and painting, he has also produced a handful of books. He was one of the first 3 photographers to join Lustrum Press to publish their first 3 books. He was a commercials director in the heyday of broadcast and print advertising. He directed a feature film, Focus, adapted from Arthur Miller's only novel. And most recently, he has just completed a documentary, Saudade, A Love Letter to Portugal. Both of these films, if you've never seen them, I highly recommend. Like you all, I imagine, I am excited to see and hear Neal's presentation. So let's get to that, because that's why we're all here. So Neal?
Thank you, my friend. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Okay, good. First off, I am thrilled to be here. I want to thank Doug Shear, Miriam Deutsch, I'm sorry, Carrie, of course, and Vanessa, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Gershbein?
Yes, correct.
Did I get it right? Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you all for inviting me to Babylon for a little bit. So let's begin. I'm going to read a couple of things because my brain has always had a problem with memorizing lines. I'd never be a good actor. I'm not here to debate the merits of either medium, make up rules about either medium, or clarify some hidden secret about one or the other. All that would take a panel of about 1,000 people, and you'd still know that they would never get it right. I'm here only to show you my own process, which I've practiced for over 60 years. For me, the outcome of my paintings is a way into my photographs. If you want to understand how I got there in my photographs, look into my paintings. Ultimately, the outcome of both my paintings and photographs is less important than the process of getting there. In addition, I try to keep vanity at a distance. When I photograph, I get incredibly close to people. When I paint, I get incredibly close to myself. Let me say one more thing before we begin. I've been photographing and painting for a very long time, and I've learned that in photography, the aesthetic and emotional experience comes after you press the button, while when you paint, that experience comes during the making of the painting. The goal is always, for me, to slow down the process, to be able to think and feel more before you press the button. And that's what painting teaches us photographers to do. I think we could start. Let's see. I'm assuming everyone can see the screen. Let me.
Not yet.
Oh, wait. Okay, Vanessa, are you going to hit the button?
You hit the green button that says share screen.
Yeah, I can. Hold on. It just went. Oh, it's up on top. I'm sorry. Oh, it's not there. Oh, I'm sorry. It went to the other screen. Here we go. And I think it's that one. Can everybody see this?
Not yet.
Yeah?
No, unfortunately not
No?
yet.
Let's try that one. Does that work? Share.
Not yet.
There we go.
There we go. There we go. Good.
We got it? Okay, terrific.
Looks great.
Okay, so we'll continue on. So this is our first slide, of course. Why is this not? Oops. Okay, I'm not going to be talking a lot, but at key points I will jump in. Excuse me. This is the very first photograph I ever made. It's of my uncle and aunt. It's a postcard. They died in Auschwitz. And all we have as a record is this postcard. I was very taken with the fact that they wrote to my mother. And so I didn't know, I'd never taken any photographs before in my life. So I put the postcard on a lamp and got on top of a chair and photographed down so that you could see a piece of the writing from the other side through the, and this is of course the lampshade right here. But I really needed to do this. And then I learned very quickly, photography is about need. You'll do anything to get a photograph. Photographers will. Alfred Eisenstadt, proudly said that when he puts his camera around his neck, he's all powerful. Nobody could do anything to him. It's a peculiar thing to say, but in some ways you feel that you're impervious. I've always chosen things on the edge. This is a photograph of, it's actually from an 8x10 Polaroid picture from an organization that sent out 7 photographers. I can't remember. The only photographer I do remember that went as well as Mary Ellen Mark. And we all went to different places. And it's for an organization called MALDEF, Mexican American Legal and Defense and Educational Fund, something like that. Anyway, I traipsed around with an 8x10 camera for a week in the city of Nogales, Arizona, making these pictures. That's another one. I'm showing little snippets of these because. And then I got my dream project. In 1965, I got a job as a postcard photographer, working for a company that made postcards for churches and hospitals. And I got the job of going down south in 1965. And for me, that was manna from heaven, because I could get to the civil rights movement and be there. And all I had to do is take one picture a day for the postcard company, and the rest of the time I could do what I want. I centered on a town called Bastrop, Mississippi. This is not considered as one of my first group portraits. It just so happened that I wanted to photograph the children of the town of Bastrop. I remember spending time there and realizing that when all the Northerners and the people from the West came to demonstrate and to work for voting rights and on and on and on, at some point they went home. And it was when they went home that the people were in danger. And I was fascinated by that fulcrum, that situation. And this is at a time when there was relatively few people demonstrating or working there. That's another picture from Bastrop. And this is a whole trove of photographs that I recently discovered, the negatives, and somehow I'm in the process of printing them again. This is a proposed book cover for my work in Portugal, and we'll talk about that later. These are some of the pictures. I went to Portugal on a Fulbright grant and lived under the fascist regime of Antonio Salazar, a man who was a dictator over Portugal for 44 years. An astounding situation. So Lisbon jeweler, painting in a museum that had probably about 5 light bulbs in the museum at that time. Girl on the train, who, if you watch the film that Carrie was talking about, she plays a big part in the film. Man behind a steel door. And this is just a selection, as I say, because there's a lot of work. If you have a dictatorship, you have to have informers. Without informers, there's no dictatorship. And turned out this gentleman was an informer. So he didn't want to be photographed. He let me photograph him, but he didn't want to face the camera. 50 years later, after the regime fell, I went back at the suggestion of Frank Maresca, my art dealer at the time. And he said, why don't you just go back and make a film about the difference? And when anybody says that to me, I run the other way, because the why not just part is a no-no in filmmaking. You never just do anything when you make a film. So anyway, this is in a photo club Featured a lot in the new film are the Foto singers, the idea of the Saudade, which means nostalgia, longing, melancholia. That's a drawing of a Foto singer that I started drawing some of the people I knew. This is a Foto club after hours when the Foto singers would all gather about 2 in the morning and would just play and sing until somewhere around 5, 6 o'clock. Another painting. Fadishta, as Foto singers were called, tying her hair.
Neal, it's Carrie. If I could just interrupt you for 1 second.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking, and I was thinking the same thing. It would probably be helpful if you could say the dates of the images that you photographed.
Sure. Absolutely. Let me just quickly go back. Sure, absolutely. Good idea. This was in 1967. Between these, I don't remember the exact dates, but they were anywhere between 67 and 68, 1967, 68. And these pictures, I went back 50 years later, starts in 2016 and go to 2019 when the pandemic started. We had to take 2 years off from the project. So these drawings were in that time frame before 2019. So somewhere between 2016 and 2019. And the same with this. The thing that I haven't said is this is about 3 o'clock in the morning, when things were really starting, were really in session. This is a painting of a very well-known guitarist named Luis Guerrero. It's a young woman who's an artist, Mafalda. I love this picture because for me, it captures the mood of the Portuguese. The Portuguese are very different from the Spanish. They're much more insular. And at the same time, they're wonderful people. They're very lovely people, but very contemplative. And this boat, at the very beginning of the sunrise, seems to capture that feeling for me. I want to just say something at this juncture. This is a boat shield, and it's sort of abstract. Again, if you want to kind of understand something about my work, look at my paintings, because the design and the involvement of composition always spills over to my photographs. I painfully try to feel the composition. I don't just design it, I feel it. This is a window of cracked glass. This is a drawing I made, not relating at the time, but it's one of those kind of things when you suddenly realize things that you do are all of a piece. They're all one. And so for me, there's a tremendous relationship between that and something I did, a drawing I did probably 5 years earlier. And here especially, I relate to the same idea. Let me in 1986, I did a series called Britons, and it was all done with a 20 by 24 inch Polaroid camera. And I was asked by my friend Colin Ford if I would do this project, and I flatly refused to do it because I had enough groups. I didn't want to photograph any more groups. But Colin and I talked for about a year. Now, he did not tell me, and it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. Colin Ford is the brilliant genius behind a museum called the Museum of Photography, Film, and Television. He was the founding director, and he wanted to do this as a show, the first opening show. Well, we never made it for the first opening show because we were still shooting. Not this picture, but the next picture, which I'll show you. Anyway, the book and the series were a great success, you might say. And I love the pictures and whatnot. But you know, as an artist, and I think we all do this, we kind of think, where am I going next? And what can I do? And what do these pictures mean? And somehow, I got the idea that I wanted to try to blend photographic tone and paint, acrylic paint, and see what happened. And maybe, just maybe, I get a new animal. And so I started doing that. And I put my entire life into these pictures. There were 48 pictures in the book, and I did 48 paintings. I'll show you 3 of them. That's one. And oftentimes, when you press the button of a camera, it's final. You can't do anything. You've just taken the picture by accident or by design. When you paint, the paintbrush kind of leads you on. And if you're smart, like if you have a terrific actor in a movie, you don't tamper with that actor. You just let him or her go. And I kind of did the same thing with this. I wanted a little yellow in the sky, and then the brush said to me, I think we need something else, and maybe it's a little red. And the next thing I knew, I had this blazing sky. And I just let it go. Meanwhile, the people down below, of course, right there, are untouched. That's pure photographic tone. And in my opinion, it works. I'm not sure what it says, but maybe it's not for the artist to say what it says. I don't know, but I love the painting. Here's another one, the Channel Swimmers. Some of you may know that. And I wanted to alter the idea to see where it goes. It's all a big experiment. And again, as I say, it's process for me. It's what the process, where the process takes you. And in this one, there's a lot more paint added. And the only person that wasn't painted was this gentleman right here, who happens, these are all champion channel swimmers. He's the only one that is also a champion channel swimmer, but he's completely paralyzed from his right arm or left arm is completely paralyzed. And then the next one is, in a way, it's a sort of celebration. This is called the Dunkirk Vets or Veterans. And that's that for that. And I did 48 of these. Here is what the Polaroids looked like. And here is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, where I've painted all my life. I started drawing and painting at age 3, if you can believe that. That's because my mother wanted me to paint and show my drawing, paint or draw. She wanted me to draw so she can show my drawings to her canasta group. She was so proud of them. She showed them to her canasta ladies. For those of you who don't know what canasta is, it's a card game that my mother's friends would come together and. But here is the ceiling, and when I saw this, I went ballistic because it's like a painting. It is painting. It's photographic painting. If you turn this picture around, you get the same picture. And I loved it. And I painted this as well. But I didn't bring it here, but you know. This is another picture of the Hatton snooker parlor, Hatton Gardens snooker parlor. And I love having fun with pictures. And I said, what do you think, guys? And I said, well, we could all shoot balls. And I said, let's try it. And I do this all the time. I don't really, people think I control my groups. You stand here, you stand here. I don't do that. What I do is find out who the president is or the director or whatever. And I say, who do you want in the front? How do you want to see the group? And they do it. They form their own configurations. And I think that's what makes the pictures honest and sociologically correct. Unless it's for an advertisement or commercial reason, I don't tamper with configurations. I don't tamper with dictatorial ways of organizing my pictures. Once I know what's going on, we then can light it accordingly. But as you can see, it's not my idea. This is their idea. This is a picture of the Seventh-day Adventists. I love this picture, and I'll tell you why. In addition to just liking the picture, they told me when they knew we were coming that they wrote 4 songs for the photographers. And when we started shooting, they started singing, and I didn't ask them to do this. They started singing their 4 songs. And if you look at this closely, that's why they have their mouths open, because they're actually singing, all of them. And I was so touched that they wrote these songs for us. It's called the Seventh-day Adventist, the male choir of the Seventh-day Adventist group. And this, again, is the cover of the British version of the Britons. It's called the RNLI, which is Royal Naval Lifeboat Institution. I had my own page in the Washington Post magazine, and I was asked by the editor, who came from Life magazine, where they had their miscellany page, if I would be interested in doing a page, and we would call it Neal Slavin's Groups, and there would be Washington-based groups on the last page, and all it would be is a photograph, a subhead that said who they were, where they were, and the date, and that's it. And they devised some kind of rubber stamp idea that said Neal Slavin's Groups. The feature was so popular, it ran for 87 weeks. And then they changed the magazine around, and so this is the DC Fencers Group. That's the masseuses of the Elizabeth Arden Spa on K Street. Taekwondo. I cannot not tell you this quick story. This is the airplane. This airplane, I should say, is the Enola Gay. Now, for those of you who are too young to know what is the story behind the Enola Gay, I'll quickly give you the nickel tour. This airplane was being restored by the Smithsonian Aeronautics and Space Museum. All of these people, all of these people here are the people who are the restorers, and they leaned in on the windshield on the front of the airplane to have their picture taken. And we were inside. Now, you would think being inside is, well, you go inside. I couldn't find a way to shoot the airplane from the outside. So I said to one of these guys, "Can I go inside?" And he said, "Sure, go inside, just, And I went inside and I sat right there. And my assistant sat right here. Now I'll tell you, for those who don't know what this plane means, the Enola Gay is the airplane that dropped the hydrogen bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. History tells us, although it may be wrong, that even the crew of the Enola Gay did not know what they had aboard the plane. I got chills sitting there. Steve, my assistant, Steve Hall, and myself were the first civilians that ever came into this plane. Before, in fact, even later they weren't allowed in when they were in the museum. But I sat there and I practically started sobbing. And I guess as a photographer and as a painter, if you don't have that ability to be vulnerable and cry, maybe, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know why you would even attempt to make pictures or make music or write poetry. You have to feel where you are. Anyway, that was quite an experience. This is a local hazmat team in Maryland, right on the border of Washington. This is a drawing that I did for Lady on the L Train. It's another drawing. Seems I work in, even in my in my drawings, seems I'm always working in groups somehow. It's not intentional. Okay, now we come to a series of work called When Two or More Are Gathered Together. This is the first book of groups I ever did. And when everything I said before holds true. These people, you couldn't do this picture today because nobody would allow these people to stand on the precipice of where the statue is standing, but they said they would do it. I'm very pleased to announce that I just had news recently, and I want to tell you, I don't want to get their names wrong, that we're going to have this book republished because the printing is not very good in that first book. And I will come back to you in a few minutes with their name, Arno and Dino, but I'm be damned if I can ever remember anybody's last name. So I wrote it down and I'll give it to you in a little while. But I'm very pleased about it, and it will be out in the fall. Okay, moving right along. This is there are 2,300, about 2,400 people in this picture. It's the Electrolux vacuum cleaner sales convention at the Grand Ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria. And in order to be able, it's an honor, in order to be able to wear these gold jackets, you have had to have sold $100,000 worth of vacuum cleaners. Everybody else only sold a mere $50,000 worth of vacuum cleaners. And if you sold less, you weren't invited to the convention. And they're all making a champagne toast to the camera. Things happen in photographs that one could never believe. This is a photograph of the Society for Photographic Education, and we photographed it at Eastman House. By the way, all of the When Two or More Are Gathered Together took place between 1972 and 75. This is probably around 1974. But I want to show you something. If you look carefully, you got to look carefully. Here is a girl, a young woman, exposing her breast. Now, if you ask me why I have no idea. But she felt, why not, I guess. More importantly, and from a photographic point of view, and from a sociological point of view, there are about 6 people who knew what was going on. There's 3. That's it, actually 3 people. Wow, I thought it was more. Nobody knew this. Everybody else is preening for the camera. Here's Jerry Uelsman, Harold Jones, Carl Fiorenza. It was amazing. Everybody wanted their picture taken. But these 3 people are the only people that knew what she was doing. And she stayed that way for the entire shoot, which was 20 frames, 30 frames. I don't know what it was. But anyway, this is a photograph of, I love hot dogs. So it's called the Sabret Hot Dog Vendors. And the building is no longer there. So it's there, but they've been renovated into this ugly brown building. This is the transit authority of the, actually it was called the Police and Workers of the New York Transit Authority. This is before the MTA came into effect. It's taken at Coney Island Station. And this took place in 1972, the International Society of Twins in Springfield, Illinois, at the Holiday Inn in Springfield, Illinois. This is back in Brooklyn. It's the at Canarsie High School. I don't know if anybody knows Brooklyn, but if you do, you know Canarsie High School. And this is the Mr. Brooklyn contest. Then this is the entire membership of the New York Stock Exchange. And it was shot for Rick Smolin and David Cohen's Day in the Life of America, of which I did about, I don't know, I was joining them for about 4 or 5 books. I don't remember. And I don't remember the year. It might have been late 70s. It took, and Rick came over to me and he said, you know what we'd like you to do? Could you photograph the entire members, all the members of the New York Stock Exchange? And you know what? I said, sure. I didn't know what I was doing. I said, sure. And we did it. 14 hours of lighting, and we were ready by 8 o'clock in the morning. And by 9 o'clock, just before the bell went off, we had about 4 minutes to shoot this. What's great about this is that I also put 2 cameras left and right of this. And so I made a triptych. They were synchronized with the main camera. And we have views from the left and right, but nobody wanted to see it at that time. They only wanted this picture. So this picture was the one that became well known. But I think in today's culture, we can bring back those other 2 pictures and people would understand what that means. And I got this idea just from looking at this picture. It's time to bring that back because it's just fascinating. Okay, I'm fascinated, not for ego, just because I'm just fascinated with self-portraiture. So here are some pictures. And there's a photograph of me and my best buddy. My best buddy knows more about me than I know about myself. Okay. Before I move ahead, I want to tell you what this is. This series that I did grew out of my current project called Belief. And it's a series of denominations, all photographed in New York. And they all get along. Muslims, Jews, Sikhs. And I've been working on this for about 7 years. This is on Good Friday, and it takes place in New York City. And what happens here is that he parades around Little Italy, and the entire throng follows him. And this is before they started. What's interesting, it's all play acting, but yet at the same time, there's a certain kind of pathos, a certain kind of strangeness that takes place. So here are the actors. Those are the actors. And then you have the folks who just passers-by, who onlookers. They're not actors, they're just watching. And it kind of mimics the scene before Christ was crucified. Now, why would a Jewish kid from Brooklyn want to photograph or draw or paint a crucifix? Given today's culture, which is filled with hatred, I started thinking, I want to understand it. And this is where art pays off. It allows you to investigate for yourself, especially painting, because you can recreate things and feel every inch of the scene with your brushstroke. So we start off here. This is the photograph, actually, that started me off on this little mini project. It's a crucifixion in the northern part of Portugal, in a city called Braga. It's the most exquisite carvings. It's all sculpture. And I thought about it, and I started looking into it. And then I started investigating, and I started drawing. And as you draw, you learn things. Drawing is probably the most acute way to critically see the world, because you really have to look. You don't have to look the same way when you look through the peephole of a camera. That's a different story. That's a different kind of looking. But drawing, you have to look so that you get the shapes and the lines to work with each other. And this was my first attempt at a crucifix. And when I drew it, I started realizing certain things, which I'll tell you in a minute. That's a gouache, quick drawing, painting of what a crucifix might look like according to what I was seeing. That would be another one. But then I came to the realization that it's the hands that are the most vulnerable part of the body and that are the most crucial part of a crucifix. How in heaven's name can people be so cruel to each other? And I started studying the hands. And this is a series of multiple hands. So I could understand a thumb, a middle finger, all of these digits, shall we say. How do they express the body? And they do. Think about your own hands. And I got completely absorbed in out of the crucifix, I got completely absorbed in hands. There's another one, reaching hands, I call this. Two hands coming together. Bleeding hands, which is what happens in a crucifix. Horrible. And then I finally did a painting of what I felt. And that was the painting. And this I call crying hands. The last picture of this series, you'll say, why are you showing firemen? This, to me, fire can be good and it could be terrible. It's okay in your fireplace. It's bad when a building is burning. These are the 7 chaplains of the FDNY. And I got to know them and I said I wanted to take a picture of them. And they agreed. And we went to the training grounds. And that's real fire. That's called the rollover room. And the reason I wanted to shoot them, to photograph them, is because they put their lives on the line just as much as the firemen who go into the buildings. They're there with them. Every time a fire occurs, one of these men or women have to go out with the crew to the fire. And it's not fun. And I felt that kind of epitomizes it all for me. So anyway, we go on. Speaking of hands, my project called The Leaf, I wanted to have a foil. So I've got about 3 more pictures to do. And one of them, I want an atheist group. This group is not a religious group. It's a secular group. It's the Society for Ethical Culture. Now, I want you to see something. This is a group feeling what it's like to be a tree. So to be a tree, you have limbs. And so everybody's got their arm stretched out to feel themselves as a growing tree with tree limbs. What I love about it and what I find interesting is that here we are again with hands expressing different ideas. The other thing is, it looks like a rite or a ritual, the same way any non-secular group or religious group might feel. So you begin to wonder, are rites and rituals only for religious groups or other groups. Here's a totally non-religious group. It looks like a rite of sorts, some kind of ritual going on. And I'm fascinated between different groups and how they're similar and how they're different. And photographing groups gives me that ability. It's the sociology of these groups that that are fascinating. Here's one from the actual Belief series. This is again a group of chaplains. This is 23 of the 87 chaplains for the MTA. Now you say, what does the MTA need chaplains for? Every day something happens on the subway or on the buses or something, and people jump off trains. They jump off the platform, I mean, and all kinds of things. And I once rode on the MARC train in Washington, from Baltimore to Washington, and I rode in the engineer's cab, and we rode along, and he pointed out to me how many people, the total of 3, he killed by speeding, by his speeding train, people who would just jump in front of his train. Insane, but life is life. This is the Alatoona Alatoona Baptist Pentecostal storefront church in Brooklyn. I grew up about 4 blocks from this place and had to find out if these storefront churches still exist, and they do. What happened? Oh, okay. This is the Lenape, a Lenape powwow. These Native Americans that belong to the Lenape tribe have not gotten together for various reasons for 200 years. And this was a celebration. It took place at the Park Avenue Armory of their getting together, the different segments, the tribes of the Lenape. This is a candlelight ceremony at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. It was a New Year's Eve peace concert. There are 2,300 people in this picture. Okay. Let me go backwards one. No, it doesn't go backwards. Oh well. Okay. Around 2016, I bought a Chinese drawing book with accordion folded pages in Pingyao in China, and it was so beautiful. I was afraid to make a mark on it. It took me about 5 years to decide to do something, and I finally decided I was going to create a series called The Journey, and it's made up of figures and quotes by myself, my friends, writers, poets, whomever, and all the quotes are mixed into the pages. Each page is 12 inches wide, so that it's 24 inches to a spread, and if you open the whole thing up, it's 23 feet long. It would measure 23 feet long. I'm very pleased with this. I love it. That's page 3 and 4. I'm not showing you the whole book because it'll take too long. Page 10 and 11, I think this is. And these were made just about 2 years ago. 2022, I believe. And then as a photographer, I felt it needed a finishing photograph. So I went on the subway and I made a photograph, but I wanted the photograph to relate back to the drawings. And so I did a slow shutter pictures and let the rocking of the train make the picture. This is one of them. And here we come to the end. I said earlier, if we could just slow up a little bit, you get to understand things rather than speeding through everything. Drawing, I make movies and I make photographs, and I often draw what I conceive of will be the photograph. And this is from a movie I did in 2001 called Focus by Arthur Miller. And the main character is very meek and vulnerable. I did not know who the actor would be. I only knew what I wanted. But it's a damn good thing that I drew this because it gave me the idea of who I might want to play that part. Whereas if I didn't do it, I'd be flailing in the wind. So I drew this. I did it in Adobe Illustrator. And it's mainly in the eyes that you can feel, I believe, the meekness of this man. And there's a reason he has to be that way. Anyway, turned out it was William H. Macy, that played the part. And if you look closely, unfortunately, something's with my computer. I can't go backwards. I don't know why. But anyway, I could toggle back and forth. Look at him and his eyes. And I knew the only person that could do this without showmanship, but with great honesty, was Bill Macy. So he became my Lawrence Newman, which is the name of the character. And the rest of the starring cast was, of course, Laura Dern, David Paymer, and of course, you'll know him. He's Meatloaf, great actor. And the movie takes place in 1943, and it's about anti-Semitism in New York. If you ever want to see, you can get it. I think you can buy it on Amazon, but I think you could also stream it on Amazon. I think also on Hulu. It's a good movie. I mean, if I say so myself. Oops, I forget. This is the opening scene, which is whoops. I'm sorry, I can't go back for some reason. That was a fantasy in Lawrence Newman's head. And it's a circus lady eating an ice cream cone. Where I get these ideas, I do not know, but it was great. I could make up anything I wanted. This is an amusement park, which we thought it would be. But what happened was, instead of an entire amusement park, we concentrated on the carousel, because the carousel went around and around and around, and we intercut the carousel with moving iron cogs. Now, you don't know what I'm talking about, of course, I understand that, but the movie is based on a very dark underworld where cogs are just making these crazy dark machines do things. That doesn't sound right, but that's the takeaway meaning. And the top part of that underworld is filled with Mary Poppins chromatic color, like everything is fine. So you have a mask of wonderful things, and then you have a an underworld where everything is not fine, and the two somehow, in the final analysis, come together. So that's that. I do all my storyboards. I don't let anybody do any storyboards for me, because, again, it takes time to do this. And that time gives me ideas about how I want the film to go. And this is not only for films, this is for photographs as well. Even if I went out on the street, I would draw a street and say, maybe even in words, list all the possibilities I might find in the street, and then go out with my camera. Pre-visualization, it's called. So these are storyboards. I made about 200 pages of my own storyboards for the movie. Damn, this is not working. Okay. That's another storyboard. This is Lawrence Newman getting off the subway after he meets his neighbor, who gives him some bad news, and he's just gotten off the train. Here's the subway, and on and on and on. You know. Okay. This is after a local meeting that Newman attends, where he's, for various reasons, he's thrown out of the meeting, and he's thrown down a flight of stairs, and the only thing he cares about is that his glasses are broken. As you could see, if you remember the photograph that we did for Vanity Fair, he's wearing glasses. And he did an amazing job, because they were Coke bottle lenses, and how he could see his way around sure beats me. But these represent his broken glasses and being thrown out of the meeting.
Neal, this is Doug Shear.
Are we running out of time?
Well, we could. What I recommend is that you let Carrie in,
Oh.
and then as quickly as possible after that, let some viewers ask questions or make comments.
Sure. Okay. I just want to show you one last thing. This is a drawing for the New York Public Library, and that's the actual picture. And we can end on that.
Great. Neal, that was a really wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. And you showed such a diverse and extraordinary body of work and talked so eloquently. So I'm just going to ask you a first question, and then there are some questions in the chat, and perhaps other people have questions that they can just throw out there, I think, if you unmute yourself and ask. But you talked a little bit about this, but you've been painting and drawing your whole life, as you said, and you've been painting and drawing sort of consistently and perhaps quietly. But professionally, you are known primarily as a photographer to the general public. And so let's start by talking about what drew you to photography. You didn't really talk about that. And you did talk a little about the similarities and the differences that you experience between these two media. But it might be worth touching on again. And part two of this question is, when did and why did you choose to project yourself as a photographer over being a painter?
Well, let's go backwards, Gary. My brother and sister gave me a camera when I was in art school, and I do not have an answer, a direct answer for that, except that I picked up the camera, I looked through it, and that it just drew me into wanting to take pictures. I tried it, and I was just smitten. I gave up everything at that time, which was 1963, to be a photographer. That's all I wanted to do. And in a way, I rationalized it and said, my camera will now be my paintbrush. It was just a sensual magnetism. And anyway, I believe very strongly that when you look through the peephole of a camera, you look at the whatever's in front of you, and you own that. You own that scene. And that's what the magnetism is. That if you own something, you want to explore it. You want to touch it. You want to feel it. And I think that's what happened, literally. And the
Right.
other part,
Yeah.
of it, what was the other part of the question?
I just, when you chose to sort of, and I don't know if you did choose this, but that painting, it receded to the background, probably it did not, but you chose to, project and focus your career on being a photographer as opposed to a painter, having always been painting, etc.
Yeah, I think it was just what I said. It was involuntary. It
Right.
wasn't a decision. In fact, my mother wouldn't talk to me for weeks on end because I decided not to be a commercial artist, but a photographer. And she didn't see that as fitting for her son. But it was just not involuntary. It just happened. Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about the interaction. You did touch on this briefly, and when you were describing some of the work you were showing. But this talk is titled "A Dialogue Between Lenses and Brushes," I think, or something like that. Can you speak a little bit about the interaction and really, or is it tension between painting and photography, both for you personally and for other noted photographers such as Cartier-Bresson and Irving Penn, people who love to paint as much as you do, and also historically, what your view on that is, and then we'll go to audience questions.
This is a much bigger question that I can give you an answer for right now. But there is in my life a huge tension when I paint. When I paint, I think I should be photographing. When I'm photographing, I think I should be painting. It's a yin yang kind of thing. But one does always inform the other if you let it. So I choose not to separate the two, but my paintings inform my photography and let it be. You know, why does it have to be separate? I said to myself, because I was torturing myself, honestly. But the fact of the matter is, and I will say this and then shut up, photography has been going on since the 16th century. That's when the camera obscura was invented, and it has progressed until the 19th century, when it was used by artists, people like John Herschel, what was his name, Reverend Jones. I'm blanking on his name, but they were all looking for a better way to make art, meaning make paintings. And so the 19th century was filled with all these people, from Daguerre to Rylander, to all these people making inventions to help them make drawings. It must have been an extraordinary time to live, because everywhere you looked, stuff was happening. So this is nothing new, is what I'm trying to say. Does that
Thanks.
make sense?
It
So,
does.
so Carrie, I'm going to let this go a few minutes over,
Okay,
but I recommend that you bring in some.
absolutely. There were a few questions in the chat that I can pose to Neal, and then perhaps if anybody else has a question, they can just shout it out. So I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. Is it Kota Ives asked, what inspires you to draw or paint instead of photograph? I think we've kind of covered that, but do you want to say anything about that, Neal?
Some things ask to be photographed, and some things ask to be painted. And sometimes the two work together. You know? Yeah.
And Marjorie Schab asked, what paper did you print on that you could, I think this is in reference to the painting you were showing of the family in front of their home with the bright sky in the background. What paper did you print on that you could also paint? How did you combine the two medium?
Right.
Paper?
It's Hahnemühle canvas, Hahnemühle Daguerre paper. It's canvas paper. It's canvas. It's basically canvas. It's made by Hahnemühle. Epson makes one as well, but I don't like it as much.
Okay, so now, thanks for that, Neal. Does anybody else have any questions in the audience? You just have to unmute yourself before you ask. Jessica Siegel, is that?
Hi, Neal, that was simply fantastic. And as you were doing it, I said to myself, wow, that work is just like in the book, when two or more are gathered together. And then you got to the point where you said that was you. And the book had a really influential part on my life. And I grabbed it right off the shelf where it's.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, my mother,
Fantastic.
Siegel, who was a photographer and a painter, introduced me, and we really just loved this book, the way it brings together sociology and photography, and hearing you talk about the sociological aspects of people arranging themselves and what you can see in the image was absolutely fascinating. My question somewhat relates to this is, when there's always been this argument in photography that it has to be pure, this is the purity of the classic expression of photography that sets it apart from painting. What was your experience of the reception in terms of the market, if one may be so crass, when you painted on the photograph? Did it then sort of elevate it into the realm of painting? Were you able to sell it in that realm, or is it considered a photograph with paint on it? I mean, what happens to it when you transform it in that way in the market?
Well, it's a good question. I haven't shown it to anybody yet. It's been sitting for about a year and a half. I have not shown it to anybody. I can't answer your question because it doesn't matter to me. It is an image. There's no definition I could give it. Is it a painting? Is it a photograph?
No, that was not my question, because to me, I agree the same way my photographer mother, Judy Siegel, also painted on photographs, and it was always controversial. And so I just wanted to know your experience. And by the way, let me add, the one of the equitation scene was really priceless, just genius.
Which one?
The one with the horses.
Oh, the horses, yeah.
Yeah, because they looked so like something already out of Downton Abbey, and then you're adding the paint sort of brought out that, yes, the house is on fire. So I enjoyed that. Well, it sounds like you won't know yet about.
I truly won't know, and I'm just letting it sit there
Okay,
and percolate for the time being, and then we'll figure something out. I just don't know.
they're wonderful.
I truly don't know.
Wonderful.
But look out for the new book
Okay,
that'll be out in the fall for when two or more are gathered together. It'll be slightly larger, and yeah, look out for it.
will you still sign the old one?
Will I sign the old one? Sure.
Will you still sign it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alan Coleman has a question. Would you like to ask it yourself, Alan, or rather than have me read this?
Hey, Neil, Alan Coleman here.
Hey,
This,
how are you?
this was great. I want to make a small correction to Doug's introduction, which is that you and I were full collaborators on the Market Diner Bash in 1972.
Absolutely.
You didn't just make that photo. We both created this sort of flash mob, I guess we would now call it, of photographers at a classic New York diner.
Absolutely.
Anyhow, but I have a question for you, which is that I've known you since the late 1960s, and until really now, I mean now this evening, I had no idea that you were so deeply and long-term involved in the graphic arts and committed to them.
Yeah.
And I'm just perplexed that 50 years of collegial relation and friendship, this didn't come up. Did you keep those two worlds separate? I guess this is maybe a kind of different version of some of the questions you've been asked.
You know, Alan,
And if so, why?
because of conflict. I did my painting and I didn't show it to anybody. I always made drawings for for Focus. You know, I did all those 200 pages of storyboards. It still is a conflict for me. One that I don't know why it should be, because one informs the other. But it's taken all these years to learn that, Alan, to feel that one feeds the other and back, but both ways. I've been drawing since I was 3 years old, much more than I've ever been a photographer. But I just did it, and nobody knew about it. I mean,
I'm going to jump in here as host, Neal.
yeah,
Thank you, and Carrie, our programming director, Miriam Deutsch, our Zoom operator, Vanessa Gershbein, our board, and other A2A volunteers. I just want to mention, Neal, that by being with us tonight, you've joined other photographers that have appeared at A2A, including Robert Mapplethorpe, Mary Ellen Mark, John Reuter, Ellen Carey, the aforementioned Judy Siegel, Willie Ann Wright, and Alan, of course, appeared, I think it's 5 times over the years. I want to mention that next week is Babs Ringgold featuring her new Sarasota, Florida exhibition called Under My Skin. And thank you all, everybody that was in the audience tonight, for being with us. I loved it myself and really enjoyed every moment.
Thank you.
And
Thank-
and good night to everyone.
Night,
Okay.
everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night. Good night.